Hello and welcome to another episode of the DigiTeacher. In this week's episode, I'd like to look at some of the educational research that's been done into unpacking the concept of TPACK, Technological Pedagogical Content Knowledge. And I'd like to look at a paper by Karula Angeli and Nikos Valanidis called Technology Mapping: An Approach for Developing Technological Pedagogical Content Knowledge, and unpack some of the key theoretical ideas that emerged out of that paper. Essentially, it's a paper which changes a noun into a verb, and I think that's a key moment in the debate and the research. So this paper came out in the Journal of Educational Computing Research in 2013, and it introduced the whole concept of technology mapping as an approach for approaching the whole question of technological pedagogical content knowledge. So TPCK, or TPACK as it's more commonly known today, was an extension of the ideas of Lee Schulman for pedagogical content knowledge. Basically the idea that what competencies does a teacher need in the classroom, and they need pedagogical knowledge, they need to know how to teach generally, and they also need the content knowledge. And the intersection of the two is how to teach particular content. So they need pedagogical content knowledge. So if you throw technology into the mix, as Mishra and Kohler did back in 2005, I think, the whole idea of, and we'll just get this on the screen here, technological content and technological pedagogical knowledge, and the intersection of all of that, technological pedagogical content knowledge. This is very, very difficult to say. But the whole idea of not only how to teach a particular content, but also how to teach a particular content with technology. So at the middle of that, you can see the intersection of this Venn diagram. You've got technological pedagogical content knowledge. You also have kind of subcategories such as technological pedagogical knowledge, or how to teach with technology. So whether you are a history teacher or an English teacher, you might be using Google Classroom, you might be using Teams, you might be using Excel spreadsheets, you might be using interactive whiteboards and so forth, generally to do your teaching, whatever content that you're teaching, independent of the content. You've also got technological content knowledge, which is technology to deal with particular content. So some content has particular technologies attached to it. If you're doing, for example, biology, you need to know how to use a microscope, and you're probably more likely to use digital technologies such as visualizers in your classroom than a history teacher might use, for example. So you have particular content technologies which you need to know about. And of course you've also got pedagogical content knowledge, the kind of thing that Lee Schulman was looking at. So one of the problems with this model is it's purely descriptive. It describes the competencies that teachers need, and I think it does a good job at that. I think it's clear that teachers today need not only to know how to teach, they need to know their content that they're teaching, and they need to know how to use technology in the classroom. And of course, there are two ways of seeing technology. The one is to see it, define it narrowly as digital technologies, or to see it as technology more broadly. So textbooks and blackboards or whiteboards, video cameras, paper, pen and paper. These are all technologies. Some of them are digital and some of them are analog technologies. But teachers need to be able to use all of these in their classroom practice. So the model is purely descriptive. It describes the competencies that a teacher needs. It doesn't really unpack that at all. It doesn't say how a teacher should approach teaching with technology. It doesn't give us any insights really into, anything. And that's a great drawback. And I think that's behind this where Anjali and Valenides are talking here about there being two dominant theoretical models, the integrative model and the transformative model. So the integrative, by that I take the integrative model to be this kind of model, purely descriptive. It's highlighting what competencies teachers need. The transformative model, which is being suggested by Anjali and Valenides, starts to move us more from kind of like a noun, what is out there, what competencies are needed, towards how do you actually do it, how do you transform classroom practice in order to bring technology in. And for Anjali and Valenides, they're talking much more about digital technologies rather than kind of textbooks, pen and paper, or a broad range of analog and digital technologies. And the concept that they use to do this is technology mapping, that you need somehow to map the technology, the affordances of the technology that you're using, to the content and your pedagogical approach that you're using with a particular set of learners within a particular context. So if we go and have a look at their model, it looks pretty much like this. So this is their model of technology mapping, and you'll notice they take technology and they change that to ICTs particularly. So they're looking at digital technologies in particular. And they also add in the learners and the context, so students and whatever pedagogical context is being used. And they're not kind to try and look into various categories of like technological content knowledge and that kind of thing. They're broadly looking at the transformative power of the intersection of all of this, or how do you teach a particular set of students in a particular context, using particular pedagogies, particular context, and using technology to do that. How do you do all of that? And the key concept they're bringing in is one of technology mapping, that you've somehow got to map the technology to your context and what you're trying to do in the classroom. So let's unpack that a little bit. Anjali and Valenides also make a key point in their paper. They argue that the empirical research has shown that increase in teacher knowledge in particular fields, for example in the technology, doesn't automatically improve technological pedagogical content knowledge, or TPACK. So just because you understand the technology better doesn't mean that you necessarily understand how to teach with the technology better. And this has important implications in teacher education, that we need to be teaching student teachers how to teach with technology rather than just improving their general technological capacity. And developing this capacity is the core business of transformation, why they consider this a transformative rather than an integrative model. Or the way I like to see it, it's not a noun, it's not descriptive of what's going on, it's a verb. It describes how it might be going on. And that's the whole idea of technology mapping. So if a teacher is approaching various topics, for example, and you can see that, for example, they've taken topic 2, and this might have 3 major concepts that need to be taught, and then how do you teach that content? What pedagogical approaches are you going to use? What technology you're going to use within your particular context? And how is the technology going to transform that content to make it more, to mediate the content better for students and help them to learn it better, is my take on what Anjali and Valenides are saying. And that involves that kind of triangle in the middle, where you're looking at the affordances of the technologies. So what can the technology do? Different technologies can afford different things. So, for example, an interactive whiteboard is not the same as an ordinary whiteboard. You can't show a video on an ordinary whiteboard. You can draw on a whiteboard, so you can afford visualization to an extent, but The interactive whiteboard allows you to show YouTube videos, for example, and allows you to visualize topics and content in ways that you can't do with a traditional whiteboard. So those are additional affordances that technology has, which might be able to transform the content. So if you're showing, for example, I don't know, in biology, cell division, you could take a chalkboard and you could draw, stages in cell division, and students would probably understand it. But if you've got a video which shows under a microscope it actually happening, students are going to probably understand it better and in ways that you can't understand just from simple diagrams. So the affordances of different technologies are able to transform content. You've also got the pedagogical choices that you're making within the context for particular learners. So I've often found, for example, that teaching a particular bit of content, and you've got 4 classes, I'm going to be teaching it in slightly different ways because of just the makeup of the learners and what I know about those students and what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And I'm not talking about kind of visual learners and auditory learners and that kind of thing. That's a total myth. I'm talking about particular sets of students having slightly different needs and responding slightly differently to different approaches. So this kind of what's happening in the diamond in the middle is this kind of, it looks kind of a bit fluffy here, and I guess it is, this mapping of technology to your content, to your context, to your students, and how you're going to represent the content, how you're going to mediate the content for students, using the affordances of particular technologies. And, when I came across this diagram first, and I looked at it and tried to understand it, after a while it made sense to me because of my own teaching practice. So it was something that I used to transform my teaching practice. I've been using technology in teaching before, but I think I'd got to a stage where I needed a kind of fairly simple idea to hang all of that upon. And this idea of technology mapping helped me to see things more clearly. I want to teach this. What's the best technology that I can choose to teach that concept? When I'm teaching another concept, maybe in a different content area. So I'm an English teacher and I teach IT. And I use very different technologies when teaching those 2 subjects. And one of the reasons is, with this particular bit of content, what's the best way to teach it? And I'm mapping the affordances of particular technologies to the content that I'm teaching. When I'm teaching something else, I will reach for different tools because those tools have different affordances. So I think there's a key moment in this paper where Anjali and Valenides are tying the idea of the affordances of the technologies to help unpack this mapping process. Anjali and Valenides then go on to look at the whole idea of affordances of technology. So affordances is an idea that comes from Gibson in the late 1970s, I think. And it's how agents in an environment are able to interact with the objects around them and how they see the affordance for them for doing particular things of particular objects. So for example, if I'm a mouse, a rock might be something I can hide behind, so it has the affordance of hiding. But if I'm an elephant, then a rock cannot have that same affordance. It won't allow me to hide. But the rock might be something that I can pick up with my trunk and use to smash open a coconut. So it might have the affordance of being a tool. Whereas for a mouse, the rock cannot be used as a tool to open a coconut. So this idea of the affordances of particular technologies, what technologies afford you to be able to do, is something which is not automatic in the teaching context. So just because, and Anjali and Valenides look at the research into pre-service teachers, So very often pre-service teachers are able to see the affordances of particular technologies. They know what a spreadsheet can do, for example, but they fail to pick up on the pedagogical affordances that the spreadsheet might offer for teaching particular content. So this is not something that happens automatically. It's something that does need to be taught. Again, another key finding in the paper. The research conducted in this paper was using 72, I think, pre-primary, pre-service teacher trainees, and they went through a course in how to use technology in teaching practice. And the course tried to use the concept of technology mapping to extend their competency. So, and what it tried to do is it took various tasks using Excel as a tool and trying to map the content with the particular affordances of Excel for doing certain things to make student teachers more aware of how to use that particular technology in mediating particular content for their teaching. And the results were generally positive. The pre-service teachers thought that their TPACK skills, their competencies had improved, that they had a much better understanding of the need to understand pedagogical affordances and not just the technological affordances, and to be able to map the two. So, I think the research itself is probably fairly unremarkable. It's a kind of, we did this and this is what we found kind of thing, a Marco Polo type of research. We went here and we found this. But some of the key concepts of technology mapping and clearly bringing in affordance theory into the TPACK debate, I think was a key moment in helping to change TPACK from purely a noun and purely useless to something that I think can be used by teacher educators, certainly, and I think by practicing teachers in their own thinking about how they approach integrating technology in the classroom. So this for me is a really key paper in TPACK, in TPACK as an approach and TPACK research. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please let me know in the comments whether you'd like to see more or less of this kind of thing. A look in a discussion of research, key research, latest research, that kind of thing. I think there's too big a divide between academia and the classroom. Both sides don't really take enough account of each other. While you're there leaving your comment, please remember to like, subscribe, click the bell so that you get notifications when the next episode is out. And I'll see you next week on the DigiTeacher.